Okay, everyone. So thank you very much again for today. As we've already said,
it hasn't worked.
This research project was within a paradigm called transformational. So it was really this idea of trying to change. And part of that is why we gave lots of time for the workshops, to give us time to reflect, to think, to share, but also to start planning how we can make changes. So I would like to obviously thank the facilitators for doing the workshops, and they are going to briefly summarize the main actions that were discussed in the workshops. After that, I will give you a bit more time also for the feedback form if you haven't had time to do it, so we can take a few minutes for you to be able to provide some feedback. The feedback is for three main aims. One of them is to collect feedback, things and what could have been better for the day, what went well, but also for us to measure impact, again, because we are looking at changes, to start collecting idea, to get an idea, exploring how much change that might have, that might lead to. And also for those of you who are happy with that, you can put your contact details, and we would like to contact you in a few months' time to ask about changes that might have happened following the forum. But this is optional, obviously, but we would love for you to take part to that if you're okay with that. I will say a little bit more about further resources and stuff like that afterwards, but first we're going to start with a bit of a summary from the workshops. So we'll start with Steve's.
Do I need to use this one?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, during the coffee break, Michael and I cunningly spent time summarising and putting on the end of our PowerPoint slides, which now haven't managed to come up here. But I've got all 15 sheets. I thought I'd go through instead. I can't really capture all the ideas that came up, but what some of the main things that Michael you chipped in, and people attending the group chip in. The main kind of things that came through were ideas about co-creation, doing stuff with students and staff doing together, and then kind of buddying systems, peer mentoring systems, creating space whereby students could feel kind of secure to disclose and build communities. There was much discussion around just being, well, actually one of the groups, Dana and Joan were talking about was the idea of the whole induction program of Freshers Week, and then we need a radical rebrand of Freshers Week. And there were some sort of suggestions about new names for that, induction and community building week, for example, was one. There was lots of great initiatives from people about ideas that could be implemented. Some from students, some from staff, potentially some from institutions. When we flipped it over to what are the obstacles, why hasn't this happened already? Actually, people found it a little bit harder to find some of those obstacles in some respects. Why hasn't it happened? And scratching heads and the like. But things like resources, organisation, quite a common theme was around if you're promoting students doing things to support other students, that's very challenging if you haven't got a well-resourced student union and special officers, and how can that be supported? There was also lots of the identifying the obstacles led to people identifying further things that they'd like to do, which were kind of prerequisites to the obstacles. And the last thing I suppose in summary to say was that despite it being a long day, everyone was really enthusiastic about generating ideas and generating good actions which could be implemented. And I'm hoping that when Jerry summarises how we're going to report back in the end, that there'll be ideas that we can share amongst various stakeholders, and it'd be great to see some of them germinate. Ms. Michael, going to time. Anyone else to add to that workshop? Thank you.
Hill, John? Patrick's still going.
Oh, I don't know. I better go. I'll go. Joe, you stay and host. I'll go. Yeah. Hostess for the mostest. There might be one group still running their workshop, which I've only just realised. They 101.
Yeah.
Well, unlike Steve, I haven't been able to go through all our flip chart sheets, but I can say that the people who came to our workshop were equally engaged all the way through to the end of the afternoon, which I wasn't expecting, so thank you very much. Our title was looking at ways of supporting staff to create a more inclusive educational environment. And our activity was split into three, looking at institutional actions, sort of policies and processes that should be set up by the UCO and funded and enacted to address some of the challenges that were identified in the structural barriers aspect of Joe's model. We also looked at actions that should or could happen at a team or unit level, because staff don't operate as individuals, that we're in a collaborative context, and also individual actions, personal changes. And I haven't summarised everything, I just looked at the institutional one and the themes that were coming out, and fairly commonly through the three workshops, which I could type up and give to Jerry after the weekend, were about communication within the institution, enabling people to boost their experiences, setting up top-down, bottom-up communication channels, being willing to embrace and validate what were termed as disruptor voices, and to thank people who raised issues rather than it being a challenge. People were quite keen that student rep reports were taken seriously and something happened to the issues that were raised year after year after year and didn't seem to go anywhere. So those are the kind of things that need to be perhaps embedded or changed within the UCO. There were several comments from the different groups about active bystander training for staff and students, so that not all the burden of raising issues fell on people with protected characteristics, that people without protected characteristics knew how to intervene to raise issues when there was unacceptable behaviour. There was an interesting suggestion about that echoes what Steve said about having staff and student training together, particularly around the process of giving and receiving feedback, so that that was seen from both sides. And that kind of linked into the communication issues. Maybe conflict management training would be quite useful for staff at least. And in terms of policies, clearer policies about the complaints process, what happens to whistleblowers. The UCO does have a whistleblower policy, but it's perhaps not fully advertised, and it's difficult to generate confidence that people who raise issues will be safe, will be anonymous. There were suggestions about external mediators, and that disciplinary action was seen to be taken when that was appropriate. And I will type up all the rest and agree, so.
Thank you very much.
Unless John wants to add anything that I've.
Yinka, Patrick. Maybe you can do a sort of thematic synthesis rather than going through the whole.
Like a dramatic flow.
Not going through the whole thing, don't worry.
You start on page 1.
So we with the curricular group, we decided to divide into themes and actions. The main themes that arose were a institutional sense of belonging. So people felt a sense of belonging, that they felt it was theirs and they cared about it and they were passionate about it, and then they really, sorry, it's just shining in my eye, really wanted improvement and change, and that was just seen as something that was embedded in the culture of institutions. Resources. There was a recognition that all the changes required, necessary, needed resourcing. So resourcing and resources came up a lot. And then we had actions. So training came up, but also systems for training. So not just we've done the training, tick, and off we go, but there needs to be a system. So we revisit it, we review it where changes, societal or educational changes have occurred, that we feed those into the training. And that's just a glorious upward spiral of wonder. Reporting, that we need mechanisms for reporting what's needed, which then goes back into training, really, that there's a way that we can be made aware of, and that again feeds almost into the sense of belonging. So people feel, yeah, this is mine to change, mine to want to change. We also had mentoring, which was quite a strong call for action, that mentoring, and there was some, perhaps gone, people who talked about, there was one person who talked about a mentoring process that they'd just started with their group, and that had been a very positive thing. But then we also spoke about the mentors needing support as well, because we don't want to have created something that's necessary and people are being supported and mentored, but the mentors are then falling by the wayside and getting isolated and overburdened and overworked. And investment, which sort of seems to tie into resources as well, that we do need to invest in these systems. Having decided we want them, having created them, we need a way of investing in them so that they are good.
Yes, I think a lot of the things that kept coming back were around, I'm not used to this, but kept coming back around the idea of, we got to be careful things don't become a one-off, like something that's as valuable as today. It doesn't just become a one-off that, as Steve called it, for the home team does, and it doesn't reach out beyond that. And so what do you build in to make sure that it's continual refreshing and renewing of ideas? And then when you have that, how do you build that into the changes that need to be made, to the decision making, to the stuff that can have impacts at every level? So that theme repeated itself throughout the different workshops we did, and we felt like that was a really important thing to reflect on, and for us all to consider in our context, and to remember that leadership can happen at any level, and to include that into your thinking and thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. So that takes us to the end of the day. And it's been a very nice journey, very difficult on many levels, but quite fantastic journey in the last couple of years working on this project. And even though it's the end of that project, it's just the beginning, I think, for us in the profession regarding EDA work. As I said, we might contact some of you in a few months' time to see whether it has supported you towards change. And very welcome, continuing that discussion. And I've already discussed with some of you about how to continue that work in some institutions. And I think, I really hope that we will maintain that level of work and also provide some change. And towards that, I will be creating, it will probably take at least a couple of weeks, but on the UrGEnT website, I will put a page with all the resources. So they will have the videos of this morning that will be available, and also the slides. You will have access to the slides as a PDF. And I will put a summary of the actions discussed during the workshops also on the website.
Can we access that as well?
Yeah. So it will be on the outward-facing UrGEnT website. Yeah. And I will send an email to all of you who attended with that link when it's there in around a couple of weeks' time, sort of thing. But that will happen at some point. So I just would like to thank you very much, because it's been very engaging, and you've all been very active in the discussions and in the workshops. So it's been very great to see, and let's continue the discussion. Thank you very much. Goodbye.